When we arrived off the coast of Normandy, our battleships were still firing guns inland many miles. Huge shells. The noise was deafening. You had to put your fingers over your ears. It was so loud. And to disembark from the merchant ship, you had to climb over the side on ropes onto a huge pontoon or raft, if you like. Bear in mind, we were wearing full battle dress, steel helmets, a full pack on our backs, carrying a rifle in one hand and a kit bag in the other, and at a crucial moment you had to jump. If you got your timing wrong, as one man did, he must have been the thinnest man to have ever been given a military funeral. It was rather very, very upsetting. And then, obviously, on the pontoon, we were taken ashore, had to wade a few yards onto the beach. We had only been in Normandy for 2 days when we had a night mortar attack, which is very frightening because I don't know, sir, whether you have experienced any mortar attacks, but when the mortars come over, they whine, and you're certain that they have your name written on them. Everybody feels the same way. We did lose 2 or 3 men actually that night, and it was a nasty experience. And from then on, we went inland. Our first town that we encountered was Bayeux, home of the famous Bayeux tapestry, although it wasn't there at the time, obviously. It had been very badly damaged in the fighting. And then the next big place was Caen. Now Caen was famous because it was the first place that had ever been raided by 1,000 bombers. But so fierce was the resistance there. But the downside was that the craters were so huge that our own tanks couldn't get through, and so Royal Engineers had to be sent in with bulldozers to fill in the holes as far as they could, the craters, so that our tanks could advance over them. And then we carried on through northern France, through a place called Cambrai, which is famous because it was the scene of the First World War tank battle. And there is a tank actually on the outskirts of the town, which we climbed into, which symbolises the importance of the place. Driving through the French countryside, 2 things I remember very distinctly. One were the cattle in the fields that had been killed by explosions, either bomb or shell explosions. Their body gases had expanded the body, so they were like miniature barrage balloons. And some clowns, not in my unit I'm happy to say, but some clowns decided to fire their rifles into these carcasses, and the smell was terrible. You could smell it for miles around. It was really ghastly. And the other thing which I recall clearly was coming across V1 and V2 launching sites. These were the rockets that were fired into Britain during the Blitz. Most of them were starting to become overgrown. But one place in particular, I can't remember the name of it, was the site of the not the buzz bombs as they were called, but this was the rockets, the deadliest ones of all, because there was no warning at all. With the buzz bombs, you had this buzzing noise. When the engine cut out, it started to dive, and that's when you'd taken shelter anyway, but that's when you were, expecting it. With the other rockets, I think they were the V2s, there was no warning. Now this one had gone up a certain height, and then there'd been a failure and it had dropped back, and it had obliterated an entire village. And it was the largest crater I had ever seen in my life. It was enormous. You could have put 20 double-decker buses in there. So large it was. And that was a little bit of retribution we felt when we came to that place. Then we entered Belgium. We were one of the first units in Brussels, and the reception we had there was quite overwhelming. I really can't tell you what it was like. It was unforgettable. They had been occupied by well over 4 years. They were on starvation diets, and they were so happy to see us. It was incredible. The other thing I remember very vividly, there were about 30 women being marched through the streets who had had their heads shaved. They were wearing placards, and they were being pelted by the population. They had, if put it nicely, they had been over-friendly towards the Germans, and this is the way that the population was showing their feelings about them. I also had a 48-hour leave in Brussels. I don't know how I managed that. And I stayed with a boulanger and his family, and the daughter took me around and showed me all the places of interest, which was very, very nice. I've been back since as well. 2 days in Waterloo, scene of the famous battle, and the first British troops to enter Eindhoven, which any of you who are football fans will know the name Eindhoven. Eindhoven is the headquarters of Philips, probably the largest electrical manufacturer of electrical goods in the world. They had a huge factory there, which we needed the space, so we took it over as our workshops. My particular unit were repairing tanks and trucks and bridging equipment, all big stuff, and the Philips factory was ideal for us. And there were no barracks to occupy, so we were billeted on civilian families. And I was fortunate to be put with a family called Van Alst, father, mother, son and daughter. There was a picture of them on the table. They were lovely people, devout Catholics, as are most Dutch people, but I was the first Jew they had ever met, and they were very, very interested and wanted to know all about our culture and our festivals, everything I could tell them, which was limited, but I did as much as I could. And we remained friends for quite some time afterwards. We corresponded. In fact, in a famous letter, the mother, Nolly, wrote to ask me, "Are you still in the army or are you civil now?" I'd like to think I was civil while I was there, but that was probably my fault, was I was trying to teach them English. When we went out in the evening, there was an ex-service club in Eindhoven where you could get light refreshments. There was always somebody there who could play a piano, you could play darts, you could play cards, you could write letters. It was very nice. But going there was quite an experience because the streets were cobbled, of course. Most of the Dutch wore wooden clogs, and they were all using these torches, which I believe are back on the market in here now, where you press a lever and it generates a small dynamo. You've seen them, and that produces the light. So you've got a combination of those three things, and it was quite bizarre walking through this noise to get to the club. The Dutch people were starving. The Germans had concentrated all the food that they could find. They'd emptied the shops pretty well, and I was able from time to time to get the odd tin of bully beef or meat and vegetable and give it to them, and they were very, very appreciative of this. And then the time came to move on, and a strict military secret. We weren't allowed to tell them where we were going. In fact, it was only about 25 miles away. I was on duty. I had a phone call from the guard room, say a group of civilians were asking for me. So I went down. It was the Van Alst family. They had cycled 25 miles in pouring rain, and they had brought me 6 new laid eggs because I don't eat meat. And I was so touched by this. It was a wonderful gesture. And I asked the adjutant if I could have them in for tea, which he readily agreed, and so I brought them in. They had tea, they dried their clothes a little, and then they cycled back 25 miles to Eindhoven, which I thought was lovely. Lovely people. We then entered Germany proper by one of the Rhine bridges. Now this was like something out of Dante's Inferno, because there were buildings burning fiercely on both sides of the bridge. There were shells landing all around us, and snipers were very active in the area. We were in convoy. We crossed the bridge, and a truck in front, immediately in front of ours, hit a landmine. It straight off the road, hit a landmine, and everybody on board was killed instantly. And then we carried on, and from that point we made quite good progress, and we thought we could begin to see the end of the war in Europe, if not in the Far East. And then a signal was received from the local German commander asking for a temporary ceasefire because typhus had broken out in the area. Our general staff thought it was a means of delaying our advance because we were doing so well, but it was agreed to investigate, and officers were sent forward under cover of a white flag, and of course what they found was Belsen. All units in the area were required to make a certain number of trucks and men available to take in supplies, and we were taking in things like blankets, food where it was available, disinfectants, bandages, everything that could possibly be of use to them. And the first time I went into Belsen, it was indescribable really. Hundreds, if not thousands, of bodies lying on the ground in these filthy striped pajamas. Some of them had died. We'd arrived too late to liberate them. Others were in a terrible state. And the medical corps, our medical corps, sent in as many people as they could spare, bearing in mind the war was still raging. And 70 final year medical students from St Thomas's and Guy's Hospital went over as volunteers to help out. And I learned quite recently that 4 of these had died from typhus that they'd contracted whilst they were there. When we finished there, I was only there for 2 days, but at night you had to strip. You were sprayed with DDT, which is a very strong disinfectant, and given fresh clothing to try and stop the spread of the typhus. There were 2 Jewish chaplains in the camp, Reverend Leslie Hardman from Hendon and Isaac, we knew him as Harry Levy from Hampstead. And their job most of the time was carrying out mass funerals with the aid of the Royal Engineers and their bulldozers. Terrible thing. It was the children that affected me more, and I'm not ashamed to say I shed a few tears, as did most of our troops there. And 2 days after I'd been there, I had a 7-day leave in the UK, which had been arranged some weeks before. It wasn't a very happy leave. I wasn't able to sleep. I couldn't eat. Had very little conversation with my family, so I didn't want to upset them. And quite glad, in fact, when the leave came to an end. And then I had to rejoin my unit, which by this time had moved considerably and was on the border with Denmark, and the province of Schleswig-Holstein, which is the northernmost province in Germany. And by travelling from one transit camp to another, it took a week, I rejoined them. They were guarding a prisoner of war camp for the Russians, prisoners that the Germans had taken, the Russians, and we couldn't save them for themselves because somebody had got hold of some aviation spirit, and they were drinking this, and it killed quite a large number of them. This is the way they celebrated their freedom. And I wasn't there terribly long when I was sent back to the UK with thousands of others, because your demob group, as it was known, was determined by your age and your length of service. My age at that time was 20, and I had been serving for about 18 months. So I had a group of 51, which was quite a high one, and I reckoned I'd probably got another 2 years to do in the army. And we came home, we had a month's leave. 2 of it was called disembarkation leave from Europe, and 2 was embarkation leave for India, and that's where we were sent.